Okay, Year 11, the third video in our series on Germany. We've so far had how the Kaiser ruled the country, and then you've also had the problems caused by World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. Now, World War I finishes, we have the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, and we have a new government in Germany, the Weimar Republic, named after the area of Germany where this government was formed. Now, the Weimar Republic had several problems, and you need to know these problems in quite a bit of detail for your exam. So we're going to look at the problems individually from the end of World War I, 1918, to about 1923, which is called a year of crisis. Now the first problem number one, can be seen from the outset, the Constitution, the Weimar Constitution. Now basically this is the rules or the way the government was formed and the rules it had to follow. And the biggest problem with the rules that the Weimar Republic set for itself was that they went with a system called proportional representation. Now, the only bit you really need to know for this aspect of the course is proportional representation essentially means if your party in an election gets 1% of the votes, you will get 1% of the seats in the Reichstag, in the government. Now, this is fine if you've got a few parties that have got a lot of popular support that maybe have similar ideas. However, in Germany, after World War I, because there's been so many problems and the Kaiser has left, there is lots of parties. Lots of parties who are extremely right-wing, lots of parties who are extremely left-wing. With lots of different parties means people are voting for lots of different parties, and inevitably there's lots of different parties in the Reichstag, which makes it really, really difficult for any government to make any key decisions if you've got lots of people with massively different ideas in government. So that's our problem number one, trying to rule the country. Not only is it hard with all those different parties, but as said when we were looking at the Treaty of Versailles, the government wasn't popular from the outset, and that leads us to problem number two. They weren't popular from the outset because of the Treaty of Versailles. The November criminals, also referred to as the stab in the back. So people in Germany felt that the government had stabbed the army in the back. Propaganda throughout World War I had said Germany is winning, we will prevail, we will win this war. And then all of a sudden we have the signing of this surrender and then the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Now in the previous video you can see those terms, land, army, money, blame. I'm not going to go into detail on those, you can just watch the previous video, but those terms massively affect Germany. The people hated them. Having your land taken away. You're no longer able to have an empire whilst loads of other countries are. Having your army taken away makes you feel vulnerable to attack at any point. Having this money being taken away, it's going to cripple the economy, which was the aim of Clemenceau in France. You're having all this money taken away from your country. How are you going to pay for hospitals? How are you going to pay for schools? How are you going to pay for roads? And blame. As was said in the last video, the most hated term. Taking the blame for all of those deaths, taking the blame for all of those problems that the war caused. People did not like the government. So the Weimar Republic in itself is finding it hard to rule a country because it's hated by a large majority of the population, let alone the fact that the terms make them weaker as a country anyway. So that's our first two problems, the Constitution and the Treaty of Versailles. Our third problem encompasses a whole series of events, and we call them political uprisings. This is where different groups of people try to overthrow the government in several different ways. And there's going to be three key political uprisings you need to know. The first one happens in 1919. It's the Spartacist uprising. It's a group of communists. Now these communists go to Berlin to try and take over important government buildings, like the newspaper headquarters, trying to get more power for the workers who have been really affected by these terms of the treaty, by the damaging effects of World War I. They tried to overthrow the government and for a couple of days, taking over government buildings, firing weapons, marching on the streets, want to start a revolution of these working classes. However, it fails. The government orders the army, what little of it is remained, to take a stand and stand up to these workers. And they do. But they need some support. Remember, this is a smaller army, and they are supported by a group of mercenaries, or volunteers actually, not actually paid, people called the Freikorps. That's a key word. The Freikorps, the Freikorps. Now the Freikorps helped the army completely shut down the revolution. Okay, revolution from the Spartacus. The leaders of the Spartacus are brutally killed in response, and the Freikorps have helped ensure the Weimar Republic is in control. But why is this a problem? They've just quelled a revolution. Why is there a problem? It does show you that there is a group of people that hate the government that much, they want to actually start a revolution. You need unity in a country, and if you've got a group of working people who want to overthrow you, that is no way to run a country. But even though they've quelled that rebellion, they've now got a group of volunteer soldiers with weapons who they've relied on to keep their power. They've got to keep those volunteers happy because they've just supported them in stopping a revolution. That brings us on to our second uprising, the Kapp Putsch, named after the leader, Dr. Wolfgang Kapp. The Kapp Putsch is a revolution attempt from the Freikorps. A year after protecting their government, the Freikorps decide to stage their own revolution. Starts to seem like it's going to be a bit more successful. Several days taking over government buildings, the army is asked to stop them and the army refuse. The army and these Freikorps have been fighting alongside each other, perhaps in World War I. They refuse to fire on these Freikorps. They will support Wolfgang Kapp in his revolution in Berlin. However, who comes in to stop them this time? It's the workers. It's the average Joe, your average member of the public in Germany. They decide to go on strike. The German government supports this. German workers go on strike and shut down Berlin. You cannot run a city, you cannot run a country without people turning up to work and doing their jobs. Wolfgang Kapp realises he is not able to have a supportive population behind his revolution, and essentially it fails. So another revolution has been stopped, but this time we've got other problems. The government is now proving that it doesn't have the support of its own army. But it does maybe have support of workers again. But what do you have to do to those workers? You're going to have to give them more wages. You're going to have to try and support them in any way you can. So it's almost gone a complete reverse from the original political uprising with the Spartacus. Now there's one more big uprising, and that is in 1923 in a different city, Munich. The Munich Putsch, the beer hall putsch. The first time we really become aware of eventual Nazi leader Adolf Hitler. The Munich Putsch is an attempted revolution where Adolf Hitler and several other key members of his party and other army officers decide or go into a beer hall and declare a revolution will start in November 1923. Getting the support of army leaders, the Nazis with around 3,000 supporters march through Munich on the 9th of November, and they march through the streets declaring a revolution, trying to get people on support. Now Hitler feels like he has the support of Munich and Bavaria as a state in Germany. However, the attempted revolution, the army and the police have been tipped off about this attempt from Adolf Hitler. And there is a standoff between army and police and the Nazis. Okay? Now Hitler has been betrayed by some of the people that said he would support him. And with this standoff, nobody knows who fired the first shot. What we do know is several Nazis lose their lives, Adolf Hitler flees, and the revolution fails. So why is it a problem? This group of extreme right-wing Nazis have been quelled in their revolution, so why on earth is it a problem for the government? Well, they've stopped the revolution, but again you're seeing some people don't like the government, but more importantly, Adolf Hitler gained support during his trial. He goes on trial for his crimes, and in his trial he actually gets massive publicity and actually increases support for his cause by declaring how he loves Germany and how he was only doing it for the country's sake, and the publicity, his message, spreads across the nation. So we've had 3 uprisings. The government's not popular. Now there's one more problem that needs to be discussed. In 1923, we obviously had the Munich Putsch. 1923 is called a year of crisis. Not just because of the Munich Putsch, but because of hyperinflation. Now we get to 1923, Germany is struggling economically. Okay, they're printing more and more banknotes off to pay off their debts, their reparations from the Treaty of Versailles, and to pay for all the things they need to do to run their country, infrastructure, hospitals, schools, etc. Now, with a really weak economy, Germany fails to pay some of their reparations to France and Belgium. France and Belgium take a stand and go to the Ruhr, which is an industrial region of Germany, and decide to take the factories for themselves as repayment for some of their reparations. The German government, instead of allowing France and Belgium to just have these factories and have the resources as a payment, tell the workers to go on strike and tell them that they will pay them for going on strike. Now, this passive resistance actually causes even more trouble for Germany. They're not making any money from the factories, but they are also now paying workers for doing nothing. So even more banknotes are printed off until we go into hyperinflation. Money is essentially worthless in the country. An egg costs 80 million marks. A pint of beer, 150 million marks. If a country is operating at that level of inflation, it cannot function. People would rather burn their money for warmth rather than keep it to spend because it's worthless. People lose their savings, people lose their jobs, the country is crippled. It has no money. And as a result, they are not able to pay for all those things that run a country, schools, hospitals, etc. So we've had our four problems: the constitution, the way the government operates; number two, the Treaty of Versailles and the issues that caused; number three, the three political uprisings and how the country seems like it is against the government; and number four, hyperinflation. Money is worthless.